Welcome back to the channel, guys. Justin here with DTT, and today we are going to be talking about 5 things to consider when doing your own pistol build. Not AR pistols, but actual handgun pistols. We've talked about this stuff in a few previous videos, different levels of detail. Specifically in the last pistol video that we did, we were talking about just the completed slides. We're going to kind of cover this kind of top to bottom here, all of the pieces that you kind of need to look at and know about when you start putting one of these builds together. Or maybe you have a pistol already, you bought it stock and you want to start to upgrade it. A lot of this stuff is going to apply to that as well. So whether you have a Glock, or maybe you bought one of our Polymer80 80% frames, you're going to finish that up and start building that out. These are things that we kind of want to try to help you guys avoid some of the headache as you go through it, start picking parts and figuring out what you want and then how to get to that point. And the reason that this can get so confusing and convoluted is just simply because there are a lot of options. There are a lot of options, and there are a lot of, looking at Glock stuff specifically, there's so much aftermarket support for your Glock builds that after you decide what you want, once you get past that, like figuring out what your preferences are, then you need to decide which one of these am I going to go with and make sure that like everything you have is compatible. So 5 things to kind of take into account and hopefully help some people avoid a little bit of confusion and headache in starting to build out some of these do-it-yourself style pistol builds. Before we really get into that, we'll just take a look at, I have 2 pistol builds here on the table. So what I have here is, this is actually a Gen 5 Glock, so today we're going to be talking about Gen 3 stuff. What that is just stock from factory Glock 19. Nothing upgraded about it, nothing real special about it, but it's a Glock. We all know Glocks. Some of us love Glocks, some of us don't love Glocks, but it is, without argument, one of the most common popular handguns, and a very well-liked handgun, and a very reliable handgun. So that's why tons of aftermarket support, and this becomes a really easy world to work in because they're so common, they're so easy to find stuff for, and so many people know how to work on them. So that's like your stock from the factory Glock 19. And then what I have here is kind of a more like a fully customized, built out Glock 19. So we have everything from like a new stippling texture on the frame, we have a weapon light, we have a flared magwell, we have a different slide than your original Glock slide with kind of some different serrations and machining. We have a different barrel that's a different finish and it's threaded. We have an optic on this one, and so that thing is pretty much full overhaul from your original stock Glock 19. We're really going to be talking about in this video, if you have this and you love this, that's great. A lot of guys like to shoot their Glocks just like this. If you're interested in doing a little more, whether it's just a couple of these things or whether it's getting all the way to this point, everything's kind of upgraded, everything's kind of tricked out, we're going to kind of be talking about what do we need to pay attention to and what do we need to know to start to build to getting to this point. The first thing that we're going to talk about is knowing your frame options. So for the sake of this video, we're going to talk mostly about Glock compatible stuff. So the most common options on the market are going to be Glock compatible. So a lot of these things are they're not made by Glock, but they are made to accept and use Glock parts and Glock compatible parts. And like I said, there's so much aftermarket support for Glock stuff that just becomes a really easy, really easy world to live in when you're trying to put together one of these pistol builds. So obviously, like I said with this one, this was a Glock frame. This guy bought a Glock and then made all these changes to it. So maybe you already have your stock Glock, whether it's a 19, whether it's a 17, whatever. You have your Glock and you're going to start changing things out. If that's not the case, what I know a lot of you guys are doing, because we're selling a lot of this stuff right now, which is awesome, is you can start with one of these 80% frames, which, as we know, certain entities in the government are not big fans of these right now, but you can still buy them, and we are still selling them. So this is an 80% frame. So it's not completely machined out. It needs a little bit of work done before it can be used functionally as and built out into a firearm. So you can buy that from us and then finish the rest of it out yourself and then start building it out. So for these frame options, you're going to find a few different profiles that are, they're all going to be Glock compatible. They're going to take the same slides. They're going to take the same parts, but they just look and feel a little different. So you kind of want to know what your frame options are so that you can get into something that you feel really comfortable holding and using, and it is going to be something that fits to your needs and your preferences and your hands, because we're all different. We all have different things that we like. We all have different sized hands. So, right, we have this. This is a Polymer80 frame. It's a little bit. It has like a pretty thick grip. It's pretty squared off. There's kind of a nice texture around the whole thing. And then we come over here to this Freedom Wolf frame from Lone Wolf, and we have a super different profile. That handle feels maybe a little bit shorter. There is some texture on there, but it's very different texturization. And then the profile of the handle also is different. This one actually comes with a few different back strap options. So that's even like a little bit further level of customization. If you like this frame, you can get that perfect feel in your hand by using a couple different back strap options. But essentially, there are multiple different options that you can choose from, and you just want to make sure that you have one that looks the way you want it to look and is going to feel good in your hand, because at the end of the day, it's your tool. You're going to be the one using it, and so find something that is compatible for the build that you want to put together and that's going to work and feel good for you as the shooter. And the next thing with knowing your frame options and the frame that you're going to end up using is just make sure that you as you're looking into it, as you're researching the frames, make sure you know what each frame kit does include and does not include. There are certain parts that some kits are going to come with and some are not going to come with, and so you need to make sure you know everything else that you need to purchase in order to get this thing 100% built out and ready to go. As an example of that, your locking blocks, Polymer80 kit comes with the locking block to install as you build it out. If you go with the Lone Wolf, that piece is not included. You're going to need to find one somewhere else. Make sure you get that ordered for when you're doing your full build out. That's just one example. Another example, as I mentioned, this like comes with different backstrap options. This one does not. That's not a necessity like the locking block would be, but just make sure you know everything that your kit comes with and everything that it doesn't, so that you know everything else that you need to get as you're working to build this thing out. All right, second thing we're going to talk about is just knowing your gen and your compatibility. So if you know Glocks, you know that we basically work with like a numbering system. Each Glock has a number, so there's multiple sizes of Glocks, and then in those sizes there are multiple calibers that you can basically get each one in. So you just need to know what Glock you're trying to build out on so that you can get parts that are compatible with that make. So like I said, we have Glock 19s here. There's Glock 17s, Glock 43, Glock 26, Glock 19X. Those are all of our 9mm options, and then there's different numbers for the different calibers, and it can get very, very confusing if you're not super familiar with that. The most common parts that you can find to build this stuff out right now generally are going to be Glock 19, and they're going to be Gen 3. There are a good amount of options for other Glock models, but if you're really looking for something that's going to be super easy to find parts on, there's the most common stuff is going to be your Glock 19 Gen 3. So you just need to make sure, because in between gens, there's always like a few little tweaks, a few little design changes. So you don't want to have a frame that's a Gen 3 and then end up having a slide that's for a Gen 5 or something like that. Stuff's not going to work. You're going to have to return something. You're going to have to find another one, and that can just turn into an annoying headache. So try to make sure that you're doing that research ahead of time to make sure you know what caliber are you trying to build this on. Obviously 9mm is going to be an easy, super common one to find stuff for. What size Glock are you trying to build out, and then what gen are we building on? If you get the wrong length slide, it's not going to work. If you get the wrong parts kits, you're not going to have all the proper things that you need. So that's thing number 2. Just make sure that you know your Glock gen that you're building on and you have all your compatibility stuff locked down. It's going to take a little bit of like research and attention to detail to just make sure that you're getting the proper parts to save yourself some time and some annoying figuring things out as you build. Point number 3, we're going to talk about slides. We did a previous video on this, went into quite a bit of detail on that one, so we're just going to touch on it real quick. When it comes to your slide, you can really go as plain or as fancy as you want. It all just depends on what you're trying to achieve with your Glock build. Are you going for a certain aesthetic? Are you trying to make it look cool because you're going to post it on Instagram? Are you going for strictly function? Mixture of both. It all depends on what you want to do. So we can go for something that's like super fancy, really elaborate machining. There's a lot of different serrations and different cuts. Some of those have a functional purpose to them because it's nice to have some serrations, to have a couple points that you can really grab onto well and rack that slide. Some of this porting is nice because it's going to make your build ultimately just a little bit lighter. Some of this porting on top is nice because you need that if you're going to end up using a ported barrel. And then we have, similar. Obviously, this is a different finish. There's some different machining on the sides. We've got some cuts on the top, and then we have some stuff that's super basic. That's really similar to your, your factory Glock slide. It's just very straightforward, nothing special about it. But you're going to be able to mount your sights on top, and that's pretty much it. So that is your decision to make. How do you want it to look, and what do you need on that slide, given the functionality of your build? So make sure you take a good look at your options because, like I said, there are so many. Depending on what you're going to use this thing for, you might want to have a specific kind of machining. You might want to have cuts in certain places. So take a good look. Make sure you have everything that you want and need out of your slide. The 4th thing that we're going to talk about is our barrels. We talked about this in the last video as well, but we'll just hit on it again real quick. And with slides and barrels both, that's something that's going to be heavily affected by your gen compatibility. If you're building a 19, you need to make sure that you have a 19 slide and a 19 barrel. With our barrels, essentially we're going to have 2 different options as far as your threading goes. We're going to have threaded barrels and non-threaded barrels. So you're going to go with a threaded barrel if down the line you're going to want to toss a suppressor on this thing, or a lot of compensators are going to require a threaded barrel. Not all compensators. We do carry the mass drive compensator from Strike Industries. That's nice because it doesn't require that, but most compensators, all suppressors, you're going to want to have a threaded barrel or a non-threaded barrel. Just super basic, super simple, and keeps things just a little bit shorter and flush with your slide. You also have, you're going to have fluted barrels, non-fluted barrels. So these fluted barrels do have some machined flutes just cut into the side. That's going to help a little bit with keeping things just a tiny bit lighter. It's going to help a little bit with dissipating heat. And also, if you like the look, you like the look. So a few things to take into account when choosing a barrel. The last thing is you're going to see a few different finishes, right? So we have barrels with like a good nitride finish. We've got a stainless steel bead blasted finish. We've got a titanium nitride finish with the gold color on that one. You're going to find a bunch of other stuff out there as you start looking for barrels. You're going to find different colored options, different fluting options. You're going to find barrels with ports in the top to kind of help with your recoil management. Decide what you want, decide what's going to be best for the pistol that you're trying to build, and go with that. But just know there's a lot of options, weigh it out, and build it exactly how you want it. And thing number 5, guys, we're going to talk about sights, and ultimately that pretty much comes down to whether or not you're going to put a red dot on your pistol. So you have the open sights option, just iron sights, and then you have some red dot options. I would suggest that you put iron sights on your build no matter what, depending on how your optic cut is done, depending on how your red dot is mounted to your slide. That may be a little bit more difficult to do, or you may not be able to put a rear sight on your pistol. But I would say, if you can, definitely just have iron sights on your pistol. Especially if you don't have a red dot, please put iron sights on your pistol. But there is that option to mount a red dot. And so if you're going to do that, I mean, there are a lot of great options on the market for pistol mounted red dots. We have some stuff from Holosun here. We have some stuff from Swamp Fox here. And of course, there's plenty of other brands making good quality sights that you can put on your pistol builds. But if you're going to mount a red dot, essentially you're either going to need to buy a slide that's already optic cut. If you already have a slide that's not optic cut, you're going to need to send it in to somebody who does that, pay a little bit of money and have them cut that slide for an optic. Or there are some alternative options that essentially mount into your rear sight mount, your dovetail track, right at the back of the slide. They'll mount right into there, and then that will give you a mounting plate on top of your slide to put a red dot. So that can be a good option if you're not 100% committed to the red dot on the pistol. You just want to try it out, but you're not really trying to get your slide cut right away. That can be a good option for that. But ultimately, if you want to run that red dot, we definitely would recommend just finding a slide that's already optic cut, or getting that optic cut so you can get that really well mounted into your slide the way that it's supposed to be. If you're looking at just iron sights, you know, you're gonna find a few different options even in that, where you can get just the normal height sights. You can get sights that are a little bit higher, so you can shoot with a suppressor, or so you can co-witness with your red dot. You're gonna find night sights that make it easier to see them and line them up and shoot in the dark. So even with those, you're gonna have some options. Figure out exactly what you want and do that. And then with red dots, you're gonna have different, you're gonna have red dots that have different reticles, or different MOA reticles, have kind of different profiles as far as how they're shaped and how they sit on your slide. So once again, just know your options and know that you have something that's going to work with your build. Because another thing with these like pistol mounted red dots is that there are several different footprints, and that means the red dot sits flat on your slide, and there are holes that you put screws down to mount it to your slide, and those holes sit in different places for different red dots. So you want to make sure that the optic cut you have is compatible for the red dot that you want to get. If it's not, you're going to need to choose something different or get a different slide with the proper optic cut. So just another thing to do some research on and make sure that you know everything you need to know so you can make the right choices. If you're building a pistol out all yourself, you're most likely going to need a vise to install your rear sights, just because that dovetail track tends to be really tight and you're going to need to kind of pound that in. So just one thing to take into account and know ahead of time, you may need a vise to really crush that in and get it lined up proper. And then front sights use a non-standard metric size screw, so you might need a specific tool to get that done. Just make sure that you have all the tools that you need for all the parts that you got to put on your pistol. So that's it, guys. And then we'll just say, I know I said 5 things to consider. We'll say thing number 6, just honorable mention. This would not be a necessity thing, but what other accessories might you want to put on your pistol once it's all the way built out? So like I said, on this one, we do have like a pretty nice stipple job on there, so the texture is nice. It's more grippy than just the original Glock frame. Feels really good, and there's a bunch of different stippling textures that you can have people do. Do you want to get a weapon mounted light? That's going to be recommended. That's a really easy accessory to add to your pistol, and you can get them pretty inexpensive as well. So if you're going to do a weapon mounted light, which one do you want to do? Do you want to do a more compact version, bigger, how many lumens? Stuff to look into there. This one does have the flared magwell attachment. Do you want to do something like that? Maybe you want to switch out your trigger. There's different trigger options out there that are going to be a little bit lighter, crisper pull. So these are all just things to take into account. What other accessories might you want to throw on once you have that baseline build all the way done? So essentially, guys, there's a ton of different options. There's a lot of things you can do. The power is in your hands. What do you want to build this pistol for? How do you want it to look? How do you want it to function? And then dig in, do that research, and find all the proper, compatible, and hopefully affordable parts to get that thing all the way built out. So good luck to everybody as you're trying to get your pistol builds done. These things are a lot of fun to build out because you really can customize them all the way up if that's what you want to do. And I'm sure, as usual, there are plenty of experts out there. I know there's tons of guys who have tons of time shooting Glocks, have probably built a bunch of pistols out this way in different configurations. So if that is you, if you have more knowledge, more detail, more insight to add in this conversation, please, again, let's start that conversation down in the comments and kind of start to create that community where, as we're trying to figure these things out, as we hit snags in the builds we're trying to do, if you have questions, concerns about any of this stuff, put them down in the comments. And if you have answers and experience about doing this stuff, please also put that down in the comments, and we can all kind of help each other along the way as we try and put these things together just the way that we want to. So that is it for today, guys. These DIY pistol builds. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one.